Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Thursday, December the 18th. They're off, we're off, and we're done. It's basically over for British politics in 2025 as of today. Well done, everybody. Though it doesn't really feel like it all went to plan, does it? My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. Already 2026 is shaping up to be another corker of a year. Overnight, it emerged America is opposing Europe's big plan to help Ukraine as European leaders meet for a showdown on lending Kyiv billions from frozen Russian assets to help the war effort. Flaws in various trade deals Britain's done with the Trump administration exposed overnight in The Guardian. Meanwhile, 38 Labour MPs have signed an open letter opposing the abolition of jury trials, the promise of many more waiting in the wings. All of this showing promise for when this podcast gets back in January.
But this is the last 5am episode of 2025. We've been here first thing in the morning while everyone else is asleep, figuring out what you need to know about the day ahead in British politics. I don't think I've ever missed a daily episode. But in doing so, it's important to say that we have tested just about everybody's patience, contacts with the early morning and late night messages, colleagues at both Sky and Politico, from whom we beg, borrow and steal their work to make us look good, and our families who have this slightly mad routine imposed on them without consent. Let's not pretend they don't get woken up by the 5am alarm every day as well. They didn't sign up for this, but we did, happily.
And mega thanks to Evan, our fantastic producer, who puts this together in the mornings, without whom it wouldn't be what it is, though he may think that's a backhanded compliment, but we will be raising a glass with him later.
So, coming up just after Christmas, we'll do a special look ahead episode, everything you need to know about 2026 in British politics in 20 odd minutes. That'll be in your feeds and on your TV screens on Sky News pretty much just before the new year. So do send us your thoughts about what's going to happen. And what else is going to happen in 2026? Well, frankly, as I sit here listening to the scratching and squeaking next door, I hope it's a momentous year for the mice squatting in the next room and not in a good way.
Well, we're going to reflect on the highs and lows of 2025, apart from the mice, with a bit more emphasis, perhaps on the lows, because that's more fun. But we have to fulfill our duty one more time. A few things to get up to date with as we clear our desks.
So at midday, we get the latest decision on interest rates from the Bank of England. And as we have been previewing for a couple of weeks, we should get a rate cut, the 6th since August last year. So we're expecting rates to go down from 4% to 3.75%. That was pretty much already nailed on before yesterday's bigger than expected drop in inflation. But the slowdown in food prices and tobacco prices that was revealed yesterday add to the case for the cut. Analysts now think that there'll be 2 further interest rate cuts next year.
The Home Office is announcing the long-awaited strategy to prevent violence against women and girls. There's a target to halve that over the decade. Boys as young as 11 will be sent on anti-misogyny courses. People showing harmful behaviour will be signed up to behaviour change programmes in schools. And the courses will be focused on challenging deep-rooted misogynist influences. Keir Starmer has said every parent should be able to trust that their daughter is safe at school, online and in her relationships. Where does all that leave relations with the tech companies? A very good story from the Politico tech team in Playbook this morning saying the government is proposing a ban on so-called nudification apps that use artificial intelligence technology to create fake nude images of people from existing pictures.
It's fascinating what they've done. This is a violence against women and girls strategy that's been put together without a huge amount of money. It might have been a Keir Starmer priority, but I remember the haggling during the spending review. And one of the things that the old Home Office team were flagging was that there isn't a great pot of cash about this, but courses and stuff are going to be the main thing the government roll out today. I do wonder whether a bit more of this is about general school culture, what schools and headmasters and headmistresses tolerate, how they deal with incidents as they come up, rather than, for instance, courses that boys have to watch. Well, we will see. Now, Anne, something you want to talk about, the race to be the next US ambassador.
Yeah, still on that one, an update. So we never close. I reported yesterday that Varun Chandra, the PM's business advisor, was the man to beat to be the new ambassador in Washington. Well, guess what, Sam? He was then immediately beaten to the job and finally dropped from the very short list this week, despite support from key ministers and business backers who wanted a trade first figure in our embassy in DC. However, Varun was superseded in the pecking order by Nigel Casey, ambassador to Moscow, and by Christian Turner, the UK designated rep to the UN, after what a very senior Foreign Office source calls a massive fight back against a political appointment in the wake of Lord Mandelson and the way that imploded, and desire to have a diplomat to do the job. Sir Ollie Robbins, Perm Secretary at the Foreign Office, I think really put his foot down on that. There was quite a lot of to and fro in Downing Street. Chandra, I am assured, will get an enhanced role and shuttle to and fro to the US. He's very well seen in trade circles there. But this has been quite a succession saga, and the short form is he is now off the list.
I am fascinated what happened yesterday, and I think there must have been movement actually yesterday on this, because in the morning I was getting senior, well-connected government sources saying, it's Varun's to lose, and then in the afternoon, the sort of reverse ferret came out. It's worth highlighting a very good story in The Guardian by Eleni Courier this morning about just in all of this topic, just how important is at the moment, and really how much you can trust trade deals and trade agreements with Donald Trump's White House, or whether they are, as one expert put it, built on sand. So The Guardian has established that you'll have remembered the deal to avoid drug tariffs that was announced, I think, last week. There's no text. There's literally no text. There's the press release and nothing beyond that, which is incredible. And this matters because it seems like the White House isn't abiding by the kind of headline press releases that they sign up to, apparently temporarily. We told you earlier in the week because that another deal, the tech prosperity deal, which was inked in the state visit, has also been paused because the US suddenly decided that there was a lack of progress being made in other areas. And The Guardian said it's emerged that concessions to British farmers made in the first tariff deal with Trump, which were held as historic by Keir Starmer in May, have yet to be signed off by the US, despite looming January deadlines. So it seems that you can negotiate all the deals that you want with the White House, but they don't actually end up putting them into practice. And that's just a diplomatic nightmare for whoever walks into the residence in Washington next year.
I'm just going to throw in a very quick, slightly more upbeat assessment on that tech deal, Sam, because if you remember, it's really a kind of companies deal, right? It can't be sort of stopped by the administration. I mean, if they really made a big fuss, they could, but it is apparently still proceeding okay, at least as the Department of Business and people involved in that side see it. They think that this whole story about the tech deals was put out there in order, and this is a bit nefarious by the Trump administration, to squeeze more concessions somewhere else. Idea that, i.e., that deal's still on track, but that they want concessions elsewhere. Either way, as you point out, it means that this is still all very convoluted and knotted up together. One more thing, leading playbook this morning is that DEFRA is finally publishing the Batters Review, the former NFU boss, Minette Batters' report on the profitability of farms, expected to include analysis of the inheritance tax reforms that have so exercised many farmers and led to protests around that. Environment Secretary Emma Reynolds is the lucky cabinet minister up at oral questions in the Commons today at 9:30 a.m. Taking that on. And Playbook says Nigel Farage is turning up also to ask a question. So expect some vava vroom there from Nigel Farage in his barber.
Right, that's probably enough serious stuff for today. Frankly, that's probably enough serious stuff for the whole of 2025. Let's have a little bit of a look back.
Indeed, let's do that. It's a bit early for a tincture, even at this time of year, but Sam and I thought we'd do the alcohol-free morning version by deploying Sam's glass half full, glass half empty framing that he introduced me to when I joined this podcast. It's just a handy way of assessing how someone's political outlook was going. It's very unscientific, isn't it, Sam? But it seems to work.
Regular listeners should know how it all works. This is a great idea. Basically, it all stems from the fact that Anne and I spend every morning looking at the same event and finding that we completely disagree. I think it's fair to say, Anne, that as a general rule, you often put out a slightly more optimistic framing. I caught you doing that earlier this morning. A slightly more optimistic framing on stuff that I can end up being and sounding a bit more cynical about. I think that's just because you're good at explaining why, and I'm possibly just more inclined to point out flaws in stuff. So you often take the glass half full approach to stuff, while I take the glass half empty. Still the same amount of liquid in the glass, allegedly. So let's push that metaphor to the absurd levels and go through who we think has had a good and a bad year through that prism.
Well, I'm really loving that framing of being the good angel as we head into towards the
I
nativity
will never
plays.
be that.
Yeah, who are you in the stable, actually? You could come back to that at the end. But we've got to start with Keir Starmer, haven't we? The Prime Minister. Now, hard to say that he's had an overflowing Christmas glass given the ratings, the rumours of a challenge in May. It's after the local elections, and so much that has gone wrong, particularly around those budgets that he's also drawn into. But, I am still going to go with half full as he gets better inflation figures this week, a likely cut in interest rates coming today, Sam. So that underlying stuff seems to be going a bit more in the direction on which he is hoping to base his comeback plan. And if growth perks up even a bit, the Prime Minister could therefore survive 2026 on the grounds that a lot of people were waiting for other people to start the race against him and that the economic picture looks up a bit. Maybe.
I would gently say that if you thought that on balance 2025 looked like a good year for Keir Starmer, I'd love to know what a bad year looks like. Okay, I'm going to take on all of Keir Starmer's spin doctors. There's been so many of them. So the Matt, Steph, James, Tim, let's be honest, it's been glass half full at best. It's far from clear to me that it's your fault at all, but you had to deal with the cards that you were handed. And it doesn't look like the coverage has been great. Sorry, guys.
I would say only connect, guys. Just stay in touch. It is the season, isn't it, to be sociable, so get in touch with us. Kemi Badenoch, glass half full. She has had a better and punchier set of outings, including with Sam Coates on Sky and the occasional sit down with me. Since her conference speech this year, that really seemed to give her some confidence, and she had that one clear thing to say, didn't she, about the cut in stamp duty in the event, however unlikely that a Conservative government would come to power. Still around 17% in the polls, but her personal ratings are up from 18 to around 26% in YouGov's latest favourability rankings. I think she'll think that's a nice early present.
Nigel Farage's glass is just full, I think. He has continued for the latest entire year to be destroyed across the political scene. Yes, he did get a bit rattled towards the end of the year about the racism charge when he was a kid. But not only is Reform UK, his party, topping the polls, but also, and this is for me why I think that he is just objectively been quite successful this year, is because several of the interventions he has made through the course of the year have provoked change from the other two main parties. The Tories move and Labour moves when Nigel Farage moves. That is a marker of political success. He is changing the conversation, has changed the conversation a fair bit. So, he has had an inescapable impact on our politics this year, even though many, many people find him objectionable character. He is doing about as in this year, where there is no big election, I think he's done just about as well as it's possible to do for an insurgent party with just a tiny number of MPs.
Someone else who can have a glass more than half full certainly is Zach Polanski for the Greens. He's made a personal mark on the debate. He is now a name with recognition. A lot of other Green leaders have not been able to achieve that. 100,000 members, eco-populism tropes showing that they really do land. Serious talk of bypassing Labour and impacts on those local elections coming up in the next months. I think he can really raise the glass to himself. It'll be more testing 2026 on some of his perhaps more outlandish proposals and on his economic thinking, but he goes into it pretty strong.
I think Rachel Reeves can actually allow herself a quiet glass of something right now. We have spent probably most of the year talking about the lead up to the budget that we saw last month. And in the end, she survived more or less unscathed from it. She managed to tick the box of keeping her party happy, tick the box of keeping the markets happy. Yes, there's a massive problem with growth. Yes, there are massive problems coming further down the track, but she actually got over the immediate hurdle, despite all of the problems in the run up and suggestions that she might have to go. She's just about in as good a position right now as we end the year as she has been at any point. Doesn't mean anything has been solved, anything's going to get easier, but given everything that people have thrown at her, including you and me, on this podcast, and she is still standing.
She's still standing in the Elton John way, and she's tied the Prime Minister to her fate quite neatly politically, hasn't she? So let's see how that works out. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, always a good political act from Wes Streeting in the last weeks, but he does still have those resident doctor strikes unresolved. One senior NHS figure saying to me, they worry that having given this very strong ultimatum about how terrible it was that these doctors were striking in the run-up to Christmas and the problems that would cause, that really got the BMA doubling down on support for the strike at 83%. I think there was some surprise that they weren't able to break that down. So now there is a lot more pressure on him to get back to mediation talks to break the deadlocks. He might not get an outright win there. So I'm going to go glass half empty on him.
Yeah, I do wonder whether or not the NHS reform plan is quite as bold and quite as inaction as the rhetoric suggests on that one. So I would agree with you there. There is just over 2 minutes left of this episode, and so we're going to rattle through some other names. John Swinney seems to have revived the SNP north of the border. They're polling very strongly ahead of next year's Hollywood elections. So, yeah, he gets a glass half full, I think.
Ed Miliband, I am counter trend, going to go a bit half empty, does have the highest approval ratings of the mooted candidates to replace Starmer as leader, but a big straw in the wind on the retreat today. BP ousting its chief executive after less than 2 years as investors lose patience with the embrace of net zero. I think that is going to build up with difficulty for the government in the next year.
Angela Rayner, obviously at half empty, nearly completely empty. She had to resign as deputy prime minister because of a tax problem. And I think the push to get her back to the front rank of British politics risks a clash with voters that it seems to me too few in the Labour movement appreciate the problems that that's going to cause.
Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, I think she's definitely going to go into the glass half full category, isn't she? Having got a foreign office, we don't know which one it is, but one of the two foreign office candidates through for the ambassadorship in the US, and she sort of found her mark a bit in that department. So yeah, I think she can pour herself a glass of something fizzy.
Darren Jones, I don't think he's got a glass at all. He's sort of disappeared. For 1 week, he looked like the most important person in British politics, co-opted at Keir Starmer's side to be first secretary to the Prime Minister. And then he was given a cabinet office role, within the same week. And we have barely heard from him. He doesn't have a specific big job that we see, public-facing job. He doesn't get talked about as much as I would expect if he had lots and lots of influence. So I'm sorry to say, Darren, we've just sort of missed you in the final few months of this year.
He's a sporadic listener. So, Darren, if you disagree, blame Sam. What about... It's not me. It's Sam. He gets everything wrong. Andy Burnham. Well, that's very finely balanced. I would say... I think there's probably glass half empty there. I think the machinations. I think there's a lot of irritation with Andy Burnham perpetually declaring himself effectively ready to serve, and how that would actually go down in practice. However, we don't want to put Andy Burnham off being ready to serve, because it's always good to have an heir, a spare, and yet another spare in the metropolitan area in Manchester come a leadership challenge. So Andy, prove us wrong.
And finally, this is a podcast that does like cats. I'm going to put Larry the cat, a glass of saucer, completely full. Great survivor of British politics. He has outshone and outseen David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and he is there going strong under Keir Starmer. He is the survivor of the modern era of British politics. Not much of a mouser, rather like Bob, who is not doing a great job here, but he has shone and popped up all the way through the year, a total superstar of Downing Street, pretty much the only one.
Going to show that in politics, you definitely need 9 lives.
Well, that is it. The alarm has gone off for the final time. It has been the most enormous pleasure to wake up opposite you every morning this year. Thank you very much indeed for being my partner in crime on this. We will return just before the new year with our predictions for the look ahead of 2026 and back in your feeds every morning from Monday, the 5th of January. Have a brilliant Christmas, and we will see you next year.
From both of our kitchens, a very merry one.